Welcome back to the Bridging the Gap podcast. It's your boy Joe. This is episode 4, and today we're going to share Bianca's story. Now, Bianca's story is not typical. She's a mother, a Harvard Law graduate, and she transitioned from big law into representation and entertainment law. Today's Bianca's story, and she's here to bridge the gap, and I appreciate you all for joining in. Peace. Ladies and gentlemen, it is your boy Joe from LSAT MVP, and we have a special guest here. We have Bianca, Harvard Law graduate, full-time mother, and attorney. Bianca, welcome. I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you, Joe. Happy to be here. Thanks so much.
100%. So, Bianca, right now you're working in the entertainment space. And I want to ask you, what first drew you to entertainment law, and how did you realize it was the right path for you?
Yeah, without being too long-winded, I grew up as an artist. Like I grew up in and around entertainment. I grew up as an actor and thought for a long time that I was going to be pursuing that professionally. And so I act and mainly on the stage, like theater. And so I did a lot of that up and until through undergrad and even some after. And I'm a first generation American. My parents are immigrants. At some point there was a really kind of level set of like, all right, what are you actually going to be doing here, right? And thinking about the sacrifices it takes to pursue something like the life of an artist. My parents had sacrificed enough already for all of us. So I was like, okay, what can I do that I'm still super interested in, have a background for, but that's still potentially in the world or adjacent to that. And I've always loved artists and championing for artists. And so kind of a lawyer in that capacity seemed like it made sense. Um, and so in law school, I kind of threw myself into any and all offerings that related to entertainment law to see
Yeah.
if it was something that I actually did like, and something I actually could do. Um, and so that's kind of like where the initial bug, if you will, kind of bit.
Yeah, that's huge. So, for anybody watching, that theater kid to law school pipeline is real.
Is
I,
strong.
I went to performing arts high school. I love like Broadway. I went to like Hamilton, New York, Richard Rogers. Like that's huge. But
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
but I'm 6'8", so it's not a lot of roles unless I'm gonna be like a bodyguard or something. So, no, that's huge. That's great. And you're
That's
in,
funny.
yeah, yeah, and you're in California, right?
I am, yeah. I'm from like the LA area, so
Nice.
I'm in
So
like
you're right in the heart of it.
the epicenter.
That's
Yeah.
huge. So that leads into my next question, actually. So you started in big law, and then you went into like a creative executive role, and now you're an entertainment attorney.
Yeah.
Obviously, being in Cali, it probably would be a lot easier than like living in like Idaho or something, right? But let's talk
Perhaps.
about maybe some difficulties that you did see when you tried to pivot from big law into these spaces.
Yeah, listen, so I think, we've talked some about this. I have a very non-traditional path. And so, having gone to law school and practiced in the kind of big law firm and did that, it became increasingly like more and more clear that I missed being a part of the creative process, right? I missed being a part of bringing stories to life and the storytelling process. And so I knew pretty early on that I was going to pivot. I just didn't know what that looked like or, how to do it. And, there's something to be said about having gone to Harvard, worked at big law, and then now you want to like be a creative exec. Like, what does that even mean?
Right.
And it's not an obvious pivot, it's not an obvious transition. And so some of the difficulty was kind of figuring out what the best entry point would be, right? Because in some ways it's a reset and it's a start over. And you have to be kind of okay with feeling like, something something a creative executive told me, a much senior one a long time ago, was don't be afraid to take, what is it, like one step back to get two steps ahead. And it's kind of what I told myself in that, like, trying to justify, like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I need to be all in. This is an investment in the future. And so for me, it was like thinking about what is the best path given my background to get to where I want. And it's challenging because I think a lot of people couldn't really see the obvious link between big law and then now you want to be a creative, you want to develop and make movies. What does that look like? And so I had to have a really kind of formulated, well thought out, reason as to why I was making that pivot.
So, and I want to ask you, and I think some people have a lot, like some misconceptions about what being an entertainment attorney actually looks like. So I want to ask you, what does your day to day really look like as an entertainment attorney?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that there can be some misconceptions sometimes, depending on like what part. Entertainment's very broad, right? There are a lot of people who are entertainment attorneys that do very different things than I do, right? And I think some of the misconception is that like it is a lot of this like glitz and glam and stars and what have you. And there's some of that, but the vast majority of what I do is still a legal job, right? It is still like tedious law work, right? And so my day to day is very much kind of you know, getting in, thinking about setting up my day, right? Like, how do I want to structure my day to get the most out of it, especially if I have meetings and calls that are kind of sprinkled out throughout the day. But it's oftentimes making a checklist and going through what kind of agreements do I need to review today? What partners do I need to get back to with respect to deals that I'm working on for them? What questions do I have for them do I that I need answered before I go back to the studios on specific questions and deal points. It's coffees and lunches with managers and agents in hopes of kind of building a book of business, right? Like building and signing clients. And every day looks different, right? Depending on where you are, but it's kind of negotiating deals and actually doing the legal work. And then every once in a while, you get the sprinkling of the fun stuff you see on TV.
100%. So, are you usually working with artists or production companies or talent agreements? Hmm.
So I'm what's known as a talent attorney, right?
Nice.
So there are a handful of what's called boutique talent law firms that represent kind of the the upper echelon, if you will, the 1% of like the talent you see on
Right.
TV, right? And so I work specifically with above the line talent, and that
Got it.
is writers, directors, producers, and actors, sometimes financiers, in their capacity as being artists in and around TV and film. So
100%.
I'm working on director agreements, actor agreements, writer agreements, different producer agreements, and it's in a kind of across from studios, right? So if a studio hires our client who's a director to make a movie, we would negotiate on behalf of the client. The studios negotiate on behalf of the studio, and then that's the process that we're going through.
100%. And you are on the West Coast, so your day's just starting. And I don't want to take too much of your time, but I do have
Oh yeah,
some
you're
more
fine.
questions, maybe about two. I want to ask you. So you attended Harvard Law School, right? Looking back, how did that decision impact your access to opportunities like a niche field such as entertainment law?
Yeah, I know it's a good question because I think to the what we discussed earlier about some of the challenges in making a pivot. I think Harvard was it's not Harvard isn't a name that you necessarily think of immediately when you think of entertainment, right? But it is a obviously a national school, right? A brand power, brand recognition. And so that that has opened a lot of doors that may not have otherwise opened as quickly. Uh, I've found, right? And so for what that looked like in actual kind of practice was, when I was making the jump from big law to kind of creative and entertainment specifically, a lot of people were like, "Why do you want to do this? Like, you have a Harvard law degree. What are you doing?" But on the other hand, they were like, "Well, you have a Harvard law degree,
Yeah.
so like there's a degree of deference or confidence that people have in you, before they know what you're actually capable of. That helps kind of open doors and opportunities in ways that might not have otherwise happened. And so I got a couple of my first kind of roles in entertainment because people were like, "Oh, this is interesting. Tell me more about this." And yeah, if you figured out that, you can probably figure out this. And so it has impacted my kind of pivots and my career trajectory in really, really meaningful ways. But that's not to say it's the only place that can do that,
Right.
right?
100%. Yeah. And I want to ask you too, sort of in closing, and I think, and again, my audience, a lot of people trying to make sense of their path towards law school. And I want to ask you this as someone who has been practicing for some years.
Mhm.
How much downtime did you have in law school, and how does that differ now that you're practicing? Because I think one thing that scares a lot of people away from going to law school or being an attorney is the amount of time they have to put towards being an attorney, law school. And again, as a full time mother, how does that materialize in your day to day so far as like downtime, family, reading a book, right? Things like that. What does that look
Yeah,
like?
reading a book. Wow. It's been a while. No,
Right.
it's yeah, I listen, law school, like 1L, there's no real downtime, right? But there's obviously there's gonna be times where you can like go to dinner and meet up with friends and this type and work out and those type of things to keep you like being a whole person, which is important. But generally speaking, 1L, you're locked in. Now, in law school, my 2L and 3L year were much different. That's when you have a lot more control, a lot more autonomy over the classes you're taking, when they are, what have you. Like my 3L year, I wasn't even on campus. I studied abroad in Paris. So it was like very much, and not that that was like downtime, but it was certainly like obviously um, kind of illustrates that you have the option and time to do things and explore things you want. And so we often joke about that too now, like, my friends and I, and thinking about like, wow, we didn't know it then, how much downtime we actually had in law school, how much freedom we had, if you
Wow.
will. And so now it's looks a lot different, right? And partly because of my specific circumstance, like I have two toddlers, and so they don't allow for much downtime at all.
Congratulations.
But
Yeah.
I think with as it relates to like the practice, right? My specific practice, um, it depends on where you're working and who you're working for, like most things, right? If you're working in-house, I have friends who are in-house and their days and their downtime, their weeks look a lot different. They're typically not working on the weekend. They're typically, it is kind of really structured as to kind of 9 to 6 or 9 to 7, right? Whereas my role is a bit more involved, if you will, right? So it's not I generally work some on the weekends, but I don't there's no expectation or no one's looking for you to answer things. So it very much is like go to a place and practice hopefully at a place where the culture aligns with how you want your life to look, right? And I was really lucky in kind of where I work now, you know, partners have families. They go home, they eat dinner with their family, they log back on. Like you really want to kind of get a feel for these type of things before you kind of jump in head first someplace. And know, like, is there going to be a really big FaceTime requirement there? Am I going to have to be in the office all the time? Like those things really matter. So I think generally it depends, but for me, the downtime is just looks different these days with the kids and whatnot.
100%. Bianca, I want
Mhm.
to thank you for coming. In closing, question I want to ask you: you've been practicing for around 4 years, right? And I want to ask you: are you having fun?
It's a good time. You know
It's a
what?
good
Like I
time.
can't complain. I can't complain. I'm one of the few I don't want to say that. I you got that out. Never mind. I will say that I cannot complain.
Mm.
I actually like what I am doing. And I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm building a business that is on my terms. And I feel like it allows me to be entrepreneurial in a way that I enjoy. So yeah, it's all good.
Happy to hear that, Bianca. I want to thank you for coming and bridging the gap.
Of
Where can they
course.
find you if they want to stay connected?
Yeah, no, if you guys have questions or want to circle back, or I'm happy to kind of chat or talk with anyone, you can find me at Bianca Alicia underscore one on TikTok.
Thank you so much, Bianca. We'll
Of
talk soon.
course.
Thanks for bridging the gap. Peace.
Sounds good. Thanks, Joe.